Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Welcome to the Packard Network Live. And I'm really happy today to have a special guest that I've been looking forward to having on the program for quite a while. As those of you in my network know, I'm a retired 30-year banker and wealth manager globally. And I'm very particular about who from the financial service. Most of my guests are purposely not from the finance area, but I'm very particular who I actually asked to come on the program. And they have to be the very best of the best and very elite. And my special guest today, Renee Cohen. I'll get into the details and her credentials in a moment, and I'm sure you'll clearly understand why I asked her to come on the program. But I was following her for quite a while, just silently lurking in the background at what she was writing about and talking about in terms of her philosophy on how to build wealth. And specifically, those of you in my network also know that I'm a big supporter of women and making sure that women have the opportunity to shine and to women are actually more creative than men, which is one of the reasons why I elevate women. I did that throughout my corporate career. And Renee has been promoting women, promoting equal pay. She's a public speaker and just a whole bunch of stuff that she and I have in common. So I approached and engaged her, I don't know, many months ago and asked her to be on the program. And we finally, today's the day that we actually finally made it happen. And so I'm really pleased that Renee's accepted my offer to come on the program. And she basically what she does is empowers women to claim their financial power. And we're going to talk about what that actually means. It means a lot. It's significant. And it's something that certainly is not an easy thing to do, but is very doable by any woman anywhere with the right type of guidance. And those of you that follow me know that I'm a big, I'm always pro ask for help when it comes to important things like your health, like money, etc. So today we're going to talk a lot about finance and a little bit about equal pay. I'm interested to hear what Renee's doing in that space as well. So we'll talk about that. She's got a 4-step system that she uses to help women transform their lives and to help them achieve personal freedom and security. So we'll talk a bit about what that means. And she's Florida. She went to Florida University, the Florida Gators. She's a big Florida Gator fan. She and I both love college football, and she's coming to us live from Los Angeles today. So I'll get a sip of water, Renee, and welcome to the program.
Well, thank you, Brett. Yeah, definitely take that sip of water. And this is a long time in the making. It feels like, I know we talked about this many, many months ago, and somehow 2022 is, flying by. I know it's so cliche, but these days and years keep flying by. So I'm glad that we're finally here today. And
yeah, that's fantastic. So Renee, why don't we just start out by, so I believe you're from New York. I think I failed to mention that. Maybe you could kind of walk us through when you, from either your high school or your university days. You can pick it, or you can pick younger than that. But go back to an early part of your life. And are you doing now what you dreamed about doing back then?
Okay. I think that's where the question.
Tell us about that.
I was like, I think that's where the question's going to go. No, yes. I certainly did not, as a child, think that I would be in finance. I know before we went live, we were talking about college football and, going to the University of Florida. introduced me to college sports. But before I went to college, I grew up a fanatical NBA fan, specifically the Chicago Bulls, during the
Mm.
heyday of the Chicago Bulls, and fell in love with Michael Jordan. And so I was literally, obviously age myself, but I was like taping every, on a VHS, every Chicago Bulls game, and rewatching it. I was so crazy. But I just fell in love with sports, and I don't,
Mm.
and I used to watch some games with my dad. My dad was a Knicks fan, but my dad
Mm.
I grew up a big Yankees fan, and I'd watch like baseball games, but basketball is really what I gravitated towards. So wanted to go to a
Mm.
school that I can, that I had that college experience and can, go to games exactly with the University of Florida. Yes, academically, as well, but it was also just that experience. And so, as a young child, I said I wanted to run the NBA. I don't think I knew what that meant. And then, fast
Right.
forward, I go to the University of Florida, opened up my eyes to college athletics, and
Hmm.
thought I wanted to be an athletic director. So I followed that path right out of school. I worked as an intern, glorified paid intern, but really making no money, at the University of Miami in the early 2000s. So if you are a college football fan, that was like the heyday for
Hmm.
the University of Miami. That's when they were winning, national championships, and that whole team basically was a professional team with, um, and yeah, great team. And I quickly realized there, I was like, oh, to be in college athletics, I'm going to have to move around the country from small town to small town. And as much as I liked the thought of doing that, I was like, I don't think that's what I want to do. So, and then just moving up, it was just really hard. You're not making any money in college athletics, not
Mm.
like people are today. But anyway, I
Right.
found myself in Los Angeles, and I found myself working at Fox Sports. I just found, right time, right place. Was working at Fox Sports, staying on their collegiate properties. So that was, in my 23-year-old mind, or 22 at the time, perfect opportunity. And I was with Fox, for almost 10 years. I probably
Mm.
maybe just crossed over the 10-year mark when I actually left. And I think starting with them at 22 years old, like most people, at 22, you're just like, I'm trying to get some of this independence. I'm finally getting a paycheck, or I think it's a paycheck. It wasn't really getting paid that much. And
Hmm.
just kind of building my career and building what, life adulting is. And you think you're adulting, but you're not really adulting in your early
Right.
20s. And then, I have the mindset, and I think from a generational perspective, it was you work at a company, especially as a big of Fox, and then you network internally and you get a job, and then you can stay with that company for the rest of your career. So that's just the
Mm.
mindset I had going in. And fast forward through my career at Fox, I started entry level. And what no one ever tells you is like the hurdles that you have to really kind of go through, especially as, a woman. It was just like I constantly was fighting to get promotions, even though I was doing the work. The groups that I was a part of
Mm.
was really small, so I wasn't getting maybe the promotions that I should have or could have. Fast forward, I went to try to get that promotion. I moved to Chicago as they launched a new television network called the Big Ten Network. So I was part of that,
Mm.
a joint
Hmm.
venture between Big Ten and Fox. And that's also, I was there for 3 years, and it was going really well, to the point where I was getting promotions, with titles and responsibilities, but I wasn't seeing it financially. And that's when,
Mm.
now at this point, when I was in my later 20s, early 30s, I was like, the light bulb went off in my mind. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. And why am I living paycheck to paycheck? And I can blame Fox. I can blame, all these external factors that were going on, but it was also up to me to understand, how does money fit into my life, and how do I advocate for myself, regardless of this relationship with Fox, or a personal relationship, or another
Mm.
professional relationship. I have to be the one that's in control, and if I don't have the knowledge, then I have to empower myself. So that's kind of what started all of this in motion for me. And then the
Hmm.
more that I kind of went down that path, I started having conversations with my girlfriends, and I realized that they had the same questions,
Mm.
and lack of understanding, or just uncertainty, or unsure of how to raise their hand and ask these questions. So I kind of fell into this, and that's where, and it's been almost 10 years, but I kind of fell into this. And so that's why I always say, like, you never know where your path's going to lead you. And sometimes that is by way of your personal experiences, your professional experiences, a sum of all of that, and being open to being on the journey. I think it allows you to explore and, those passions that you may have not otherwise recognized earlier on.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is kind of funny. If I look back on my own journey, a lot of it's very different than yours, obviously. But I had my dream was to be a banker, which I fulfilled, and
Yeah.
it was to retire financially independent at 65.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to achieve both, and
Mm-hmm.
the latter at age 52. That's great. But it was not part of my plan to
Mm-hmm.
work across 30 countries, to take the route that I took. It was far from linear,
Mm-hmm.
and that all I did was kind of get in the game, and then these things happen, right? That's similar
Yeah.
to what happened with you, it sounds like. And I'm curious that during your time at Fox, when you were noticing that you were being overlooked for promotions and things like that, did you take that at the time personally? I mean, did it upset you, or did you know at the time that maybe it's a systemic issue? What was your thought at the time when you're in that? Because a lot of women are in a similar
Yep.
situation now with what they're doing. So I'm just interested with what your mindset was at, not now, but at the time. And because I think a lot of people might resonate well with a lot of women today.
Yeah, I think a little bit of all, frankly. I think some of
Mhm.
it was the mindset of working in an industry like sports or entertainment. And like you said at the beginning, I'm here living in Los Angeles, and so the
Mm.
entertainment field is obviously very prevalent. And in sports too, because some of these really competitive industries, especially back then when there wasn't these digital avenues to get
Mm.
into industries. I mean, obviously technology and social media has completely transformed a lot of industries, but we're talking, 15, 20 years ago. But, I'd say like even 10, 12 years ago, when I was maybe at that mid management level, I think it was a little bit of everything. It was a little bit of my own mindset. I was like, oh, I'm working in this industry, and check mark everyone on the outside looking in. So this
Mm.
is cool. Why would I want to leave it? You get to go to games, you get to do X, Y, and Z. And you kind of write off a little bit of your livelihood and saying, okay, the trade-off for not getting
Right.
paid is the glamour, what seems like glamorous on the outside. So I think I've had a little bit of that mindset. And I think I got caught in the corporate
Mm.
structure of I started with them entry level. And so they were always benchmarking. And I think a lot of companies, and this is not to, just against Fox, it was they were benchmarking me against
Mhm.
my original salary. I'm like, how can I ever make deep six figures or get my
Right.
value if you're starting me at $35,000? Like,
Mm.
I'll never, no matter what kind of job I have, yes, I'm getting promotions, but if you're still incrementally, giving me percentages based on where I was, 5 years ago, or where I started from, or 3 years, it's just, I was like, I'm never going to make up that difference. So that
Right.
is what
Right.
I found to be my biggest frustration. And then,
Mhm.
yes, I found out that, guys that were in my peer group, even if we were doing different jobs, when I would get, my 3%, and when I was towards the end of my career at Fox, right now we're sitting here in the financial crisis. It was 2008 to
Mm.
2011,
Mhm.
right? So it
Yep.
was a lot of like, there's hiring freeze and promotion freezes, all of these things. And I'm like, I get that. But then, I also see people still traveling, all these. But I do know that, yes, I was getting a 3%, and, my friend who he got a 6%. So I was like, there's a difference here. And when I questioned it, I was
Yep.
just kind of met with some truth. And that's where I think for me, that was my moment of learning how to advocate for myself, because that was, no matter what kind of relationship you're in, I always say to everyone, right? To especially women, personally and professionally, ends up being a relationship, and you have to
Right.
advocate for yourself and be in control.
So you basically realized, and I guess maybe the first takeaway from this conversation today is that you needed to do something yourself. The system, just continuing to exist in the system, wasn't going to get you out of that situation.
Totally. It's like you can't be a
Yeah.
cog in the cog in the wheel, right? It's like you have to
Right.
be, you have to be proactive. And I think and we see this every single day, especially in this environment post-pandemic, but even pre-pandemic, is that the younger generations, they're like, show me if you want my value, you have to show me how you're going to grow me too. So I think longer the days that you get in with a company and you're like, hey, this is great, and I'm just going to get promoted, work hard, and they'll notice my work, and then I'm gonna stay with this company for basically the duration of my career.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Times have certainly changed a lot.
Changed.
Renee, I'm going to pause this really quick and just acknowledge some of the people that are tuning in, and a big thank you to all of you. And I'm going to recognize you in a second, many of you. And while I'm doing that, please do tee up any questions or comments that you have for either Renee or myself, and we'll be happy to get to that. And for those of you that are watching this on the replay, majority of my network is in Asia, and I know many of you will. Feel free, even though you're not watching us live, to tee up any questions or comments, and Renee and I will certainly get to that as well. So we've got Regina from Philadelphia, my friend Regina Hutchings here. Regina, thank you for taking the time to tune in. Really appreciate that. She's agreeing with a big part of what you're saying, Renee, on the women. We've got William Sar James here from Sierra Leone. William, thank you for tuning in. We've got Shafak Jara here as well. Great to have you, Shafak, who's from Canada. We have somebody from Rwanda here. Kantagwa Claire is here as well. We have Denise Bachman from Houston that's here with us as well. We have Dee Powers from New York that's here.
Wow.
We've got Padre John from Ghana. We've got Dalmas Okuth. I'm not sure where you're from. And we've got Joe Beth Collier from Dallas, Texas here. So great that's just to name a few. So please, it looks like there's 24 people tuned in, including those on YouTube. So anyway, it's great to have all of you here. Again, please tee up any questions that you have for us as well. So Renee, so then you wound up back in LA, right? And then so you were in Chicago with Fox, and then what happened after that?
I came back to Los Angeles. So Chicago winters were not for me. When I was wearing a winter jacket in May at a Cubs game, I was like, I don't think this is, I don't know if I could survive another winter season. So as much as I think Chicago is an amazing, amazing city, I'm like, I think I like to go visit than live in it. But I came back to Los Angeles, and I think, again, when I was in Chicago, these seeds were being planted around, think that I'm not sure if I'm really on the path that I actually want to be on anymore. But I think the industry was changing. Industries were changing, but specifically sports as well, and the entertainment, as the advent of social media and digital, and how that was changing the linear, how we view, television. So I just saw an opportunity to say, like, really take a look internally. I'm like, am I on the path? Am I frustrated by these, the financial, woes per se? But I was able to do that in Los Angeles, where I have friends and family, and I felt a little bit more centered. And I really got encouraged and pushed by a lot of my friends who I'd been having these kind of conversations with, just saying, hey, doing this on the professional side and getting the licenses and getting the designations, and really now taking this to the next level, not just talking about it, as being able to be on the side of the table to really help. And what really excited me about that was the fact that I didn't have to know that I had to know, this is what I wanted to do for, since I was 8 years old or even younger, or whatever that may be, was that I can be in a position to get myself to, get educated around this topic, really understand the modern ways of how to really build wealth, and really then not only help myself, but help my friends, and really use this as a communal opportunity.
Absolutely. That's good. So you you got, I assume, your certifications, your
Yeah,
licenses, and all of your
all,
credentials as well.
all of
How
that.
long did
Yeah.
how long did that take?
I mean, from, I got a lot of licenses so I can kind of, help people with their investments, like my investment licenses, my insurance licenses right away. My certified financial planner designation took me 5 years from the start of getting or starting business. Well, I should say 5 years, to actually start to take the courses. It's for anyone that knows about at least here in the States, the certified financial planner designation, there's courses that you have to take before you can sit for the exam. In my mind, when I transitioned into this career, I was like, okay, I'm going to start business, and then I will also study, and I will do, you do this as I'm, studying. I was like, there's a 3-year minimum to even have. You have to have experience of at least 3 years. So I was like, oh, I'll just study the courses over these next 3 years. I just completely did not understand going into this, like the how to really build business, and then also the time to study. I was like, okay, I'm not doing that.
Wow.
So I really focus on building business, really partnering with people to help really my own knowledge, and then worked on the getting the CFP. So I've been a CFP now for a few years, and I think the direction of the industry, it's important to really at least here in this in the States to have that designation. I don't know the same maybe types of designations in other countries, but with social media and people getting advice on TikTok and other social media platforms, I think it's so important for people to know who are they talking to and getting advice from, and that person being licensed and credentialed and not just someone who's giving out opinions.
Right. Yeah. You did a post, I think, just
Yeah,
this week on this
I
point
did.
about taking advice from the internet. There's a lot of advice out there, folks, but and I'd like to. I thought about that, and in April of this year, I was here I'm in Nebraska today, and I was here in Nebraska, and I walked outside. I was on my way to the dentist, actually. Walked outside and slipped on some black ice, and I hit my head, and thank goodness I'm still together now. So maybe it knocked some sense into me. But as part of protecting that, my reflex, I fell back on my left hand, just kind of natural to catch me. And so it hurt for, a few weeks and everything. And of course, I was the first person to get on the internet and to figure out what the heck was wrong. And of course, all the diagnoses were wrong. And anyway, fast forward a bit of time, and I consulted with my doctor, who's a specialist, and she got an MRI ordered and that type of thing. And so we could get the proper treatment for my hand, which was a slightly torn ligament. So anyway, the bottom line is the internet didn't help me with that pain, right? I went to the doctor, and something as serious as a body. It's the same thing with money, right?
It is. I mean, because it's really, whether it's the body or whether it's money, it's really costly to make a mistake, right? It takes more time to undo those mistakes. But but at the end of the day, that's not to say you shouldn't be afraid to make a mistake, but there is no mistakes if you're progressing when you're getting the right guidance. Right. But it's costly. I mean, you go down one path and say, okay, this is my diagnosis, and you can try to treat yourself and do all the rehab and do all that, and realize that, like, get to the end, right? And just like, wait, I'm still in the same position that I was when I started. Or I could have fast tracked that by getting the right diagnosis and getting on the right treatment plan. Same thing with your money. And the post that I made this, in relation to that this week was when, because it was announced that Kim Kardashian was fined by the SEC, $1.3 million. I have said for a long time, whether it's crypto or not, it's just that you see so many people giving out investment advice. And where's the SEC? Because as a licensed professional, I can only do things educationally. I can never, call out specific investment advice. I would lose my licenses in a heartbeat. So that's kind of the post that I made this week, was that, she posted something about, some crypto coin, and people ran with that and thought that was, I guess, going to be the next big thing because she was promoting it.
Well, yeah, and I think those in my network know that I've been I'll just be blunt, attacking
Crypto.
people
Yeah.
peddling crypto
Crypto
on this
futures.
platform that don't talk about the risk. I don't
Yeah.
have anything against crypto, and I don't know if you do or not either. But what I am against is people telling one side of the story, saying,
Yep.
"Well, you can make an unlimited amount." So I ran a test, Renee, one time of I took 8 people that solicited me for crypto, and I engaged with them, and I said, "Tell me all about it." And 8 out of 8 people didn't mention the risk. And I said, well, can it go down? Can it? Well, you don't need to worry about that because Elon Musk is a bunch of, and so you have a bunch of people there's not a requirement to be certified in the country currently around this. Just like there's not, I was watching some IRS agents earlier this morning talk about what they're going to do with the hiring 88,000 new agents as part of the new initiative that was, or the new law that was passed. And anyway, the IRS agents, it's not clear how crypto is taxed. And so people are very likely to get it wrong. So if you're going to play that game, you need to understand that there are some risks there, including tax risks. Anyway, all 8 just miserably failed it. So, I think the message to people here is make sure that whether it's your health, whether it's your money, that you're dealing and taking advice from somebody that's actually qualified to do that. And in the United States, there's a great infrastructure and supervisory structure around that. And you obviously operate within that, and you're amongst the elite. So, which is great. Yeah.
Yes. And I totally with you. I'm not against crypto. I don't know enough about it myself, but I'm not against it. I think what I am for is people being educated around pros and cons, because there's no financial instrument out there that is a silver bullet, right? It is everything. There's a pro and a con to everything. And so it's being informed around what those are. So this way you're building enough tools. I always tell people is you're building enough tools in your tool shed to have, because every single one has a pro and a con. So where just like in our own lives, where there's a weakness, there's a strength. Where there's a strength, there's a weakness. And you want to have, people around you that can complement those things. Same thing in your financial world. So that you want to have the right tools in your tool shed. So where there is a weakness in a financial product, you have another one that can complement that. So this way you're putting those right things together in relation to your own life.
Yeah, you're right. And and things are changing all the time too, right, Renee? I mean, having your money in a bank, let's say a bank certificate of deposit. Let's say that you bought a bank CD 4 years ago, and let's say that it only just now matured. Well, the environment's quite different than it was, 4 or 5 years ago, right? And now that CD is underwater because we have something called inflation, right?
Yep, totally.
And that's why people need to really engage with you. Just one pause here. So we have Thomas Condell from Australia that's here saying it's not regulated. Crypto's not regulated in Australia either. I don't want to turn this, Renee, into a crypto conversation. I would just wanted to open up the risk piece as well. But I think Thomas is obviously, he wants people to stop peddling it as well. And I think we all do as well. Denise, the IRS agents there's something in the law that was passed recently where the IRS is receiving a lot of funding. And part of that is to hire 88,000 IRS agents. So that I think answers that question as well. We got Padre John here. Padre's got a question, Renee, for a lady. Now this question is coming from Ghana, so it could be different in Africa. But for a lady, it's usually more difficult to become financially independent. Not as easy as the guys, because the guy will always want to have a say-so beforehand and that type of thing. So how do you navigate your way for a lady if this is the occasion?
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
think that obviously maybe there's some cultural differences, right? Being here in the
Yep.
States versus, other parts of the world. I think in some ways, I think a lot of being in the States and being an independent, maybe not, I'm not necessarily financially independent myself. Obviously, I'm continuing to work on that, but what I do notice in the States is that a lot of men will say they want a woman who's independent, and then
hmm
they get intimidated, right? So maybe some of my single girlfriends
hmm
second
Right.
that. But in my dating life, that's certainly something what I experienced. I think, I think having conversations with your partner, your spouse, is really
hmm
important because um, it sometimes monetarily, maybe things aren't always equal, 50-50. But I think, when it takes two people to run a household, I think, information is always important and it can cause less arguments. And so, um, I wouldn't necessarily say, hey, to have a say so, but how can you involve, someone else in the conversation? How can you empower your partner um, to just have an understanding so that person isn't completely blind of what's going on
Right.
from a financial perspective. And look at it from, and again, this could be very, more cultural, but looking at it from a perspective of educating versus trying to dominate and be in control of the
hmm
financial situation.
Yeah, I think that's a great response, Padre. I'm sure that answered the question. Renee, let's kind of get right into the trenches here on what we really want to talk about today, which is for women. What you do specifically is what is your approach, if you could talk about, with helping women empower themselves to claim their financial power? Can you talk to people about what that actually means?
Yeah. So I know it can feel really daunting as like, what does this
hmm
mean to claim your power? And I always to this day, I still am like, oh, how do I describe describe this? But at the end of the day, I think claiming your financial power is really standing in your own power and not running from your money story, is really understanding like where you are today and where do you want to be. And there's always a gap, right? It's like no matter what, if you are not living, completely independently, there's a gap. There's a gap of where
Right.
you are today and where you want to be. That gap's
Mm.
going to be relative to, every single one of us. That's going to mean something different to me than it means to the next person. And what, obviously being a woman myself, what I find is that women, because this feels like an intimidating topic. It feels like there has been a lot of jargon out there and confusing words, and generationally just deferring to your partner, saying that person knows it better than I do, therefore I'll just let that person handle it, I'll run everything else. um it puts us in a situation where if there's a divorce, if there's a death, and if there is an unexpected event, right? I had a client that husband in 40s had a major stroke and is completely permanently disabled, right? Those are
Mm.
things that life happens. And so it is important to really stand in your own power and not be scrambling and trying to figure it out. It also helps to not feel like you're far behind, where everyone else is. And because most of the time you're not far behind, it just means that because this isn't a topic that a lot of people talk about. So it's really about standing in your own power and thinking about, and I know it's a buzzword these days, is the self-care, is that you have to think about your financial life in the same way that you think about your physical health, your spiritual health, your physical, your emotional, your mental, all of that. You can't just completely
Mm.
avoid or ignore such an important part of your life, because money is just a tool. How you want to live your life is completely on you. And money is the tool that just helps you get from point A to point B.
Right. Do you find that the a lot of the clients you speak to, or even potential clients, do you find that they are living within their means, or they're living outside their means? Or, and then if they're not living within their means, could you talk about how you kind of get them, kind
Mhm.
of reel them in and get them on a better track?
Yeah, and I'll also start that, obviously a
Yep.
lot of big part of my clients are women. And I think that I can speak to women in a way where I was, just a few years ago, 10 years ago. And again, understanding kind of the trajectory over if I hadn't moved in this career, where I'd be today. So, what I've done over the last 10 years. That's not to say I obviously work with also men as well, because
Hmm.
men are also want to be empowered in this way. So that's where I really appreciate, the things that you do, and not only to support women, but, it's like having these conversations as a man, like it takes both, both sides, and being
Hmm.
able to have these conversations. I live in Los Angeles. So do people live out of their means? Of course. I live, I live in the land of what you see, you should not believe. So,
Right.
but I do work with clients all over the country. And so I think it really is it depends on the region that someone's in, frankly. And there's
Right.
a lot of people that are in Los Angeles, right, that are living within their means, and there's a lot of people here that don't, and there's a lot of people that are living in other parts of the country that are the same. And I think where it really starts, if you're not living within your means, it really frankly starts with some money story that you have either developed and have held on to from your childhood, and that is just kind of grown with you in adulthood, and you haven't really understood it, have faced it, and you've developed these behaviors. And not to vilify or have any shame or judgment, but we create our habits and our behaviors really early on. And sometimes we get to a certain point in our adulthood where you're like, I have to look at myself in the mirror and say, how did I get here? Or how did I develop
Right.
this? And so that's really where it starts. And then really owning that and having awareness, so you can really peel back any sort of shame or judgment, and wanting to step into your power, so you can look at your numbers and say, okay, how am I spending money? Because clearly something's not working, so I have to be willing to do the work to now create new behaviors, create a new mindset on how I'm spending money, so I can live within my means. And therefore I can make sure that I'm advocating for my future self. And that's what what I always encourage, is that we can live our lives today, but by living your life completely in the moment is not advocating for your future self. There's no one else who's going to advocate for your future self other than you.
Right. So debt, if you could share your views on debt, debt can either be a tool or a weapon, depending
Yep.
on, what it's used for. You have any views on debt or advice for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think debt in this country, obviously I'm talking about the States, but I'm sure it's similar, across other countries, is
Hmm.
when it comes to consumer debt, credit cards. I mean, the access that we have is just, it baffles me that, there's zero, very little, limitations on how much someone can put on cards and charge, and how little information they have when they're signing up on the interest rates. And,
Hmm.
they're like, okay, for every $1,000 you're putting on that credit card, do you realize that it's costing you 25%? So when it comes to consumer debt, it is in making sure that you're paying that off and not getting yourself in consumer debt. I'm a proponent of using credit cards strategically by putting, expenses, and so you're getting the points and the miles. Like, my family is across the country, so I always like to put stuff on my card, so this way I get those miles and get those hotel
Hmm.
rooms and all that fun stuff. But I'm paying down the credit card every single month, right? Like, I'm not putting what I can't afford on the credit card. I'm not just saying, hey, let's go to Hawaii next month and let me put a $15,000 trip on there on top of everything else that I normally do. It's
Yep.
making sure that you're spending within your means and not accumulating interest. I wasn't always that way. Certainly in my 20s, I had to learn the hard way. So if you're in consumer debt, and I also made a post this week about it, is just to know your numbers and have a plan on paying that down and making sure that you're living within your means. There's obviously a lot of talk with student loans in this country and the forgiveness that, Biden just announced, and how people are, leveraging student loans to get educated. I think it's a complete business to me. And I believe in, like, yes, giving
Mm.
access to people for money to get educated, but not but know what is that education going to be worth? Like, how are we taking out
Right.
$200,000 worth of loans when the career that I want to go into is paying $50,000? I think that's
Mm,
the problem in this, with student loans. Um, and hopefully we can find a way. I think schools are businesses, but I don't see student loans as a bad debt. I think it does hold people back. And same thing with mortgages, living
mm,
also in a high cost, real estate market like Los Angeles, is that I don't think those two debts, the mortgage and student loans, should hold you back from moving the needle forward in your financial life. Credit card debt, we got to get rid of. When we're able to get rid of credit card debt and we're building wealth, and what the rich people do is that then they are leveraging debt as a tool. And I'm a big proponent. I see this with my own clients. I see this, I've done this for myself, is that if you can leverage debt in a strategic way, debt isn't bad. It's just you have to, just like anything else, when you're using it as the right tool in the right way, it could be very powerful, but it's not a free pass to just use it and go, spend, your life away without being able to afford it. So by getting to a place, if you're spending within your means and you're able to build assets on your balance sheet and build wealth, debt becomes an option that allows you to use it strategically. But if you're constantly in this credit card or, in debt, you're never getting to that place.
right. Yeah, that's probably, I can't think of one case where credit card debt specifically is a good tool to carry in your
Mm-mm.
toolbox,
Yeah.
right? So
Not for a
other,
long time. Yeah, it's like,
right,
maybe to, for a month, right? Or if it could buy you some
right.
time. I know, there's times where I'm like, I needed to use credit cards, especially when I started business. It's like I didn't have access to, business loans. Yes, I've used credit cards, but I've had to, use that very strategically. So I'm not getting myself in debt. It's just like, can I buy myself a month? And that's in a very, very rare case of credit cards, to your point, ever a good option.
Right. What role does inflation, now we're dealing with something
Oh,
in
my.
many economies where it's a factor that hasn't been around for some people in their entire lifetime,
Mhm.
because we've been in a very low inflationary period. So with inflation now, does that change your stance at all as it relates to carrying debt?
Yeah, I mean, if you're carrying credit card debt right now, it's just becoming more expensive to carry that debt, because of
Mhm.
inflation, right? And because of interest rates. And I think it's a catch-22 for some people, because coming off the pandemic, where people maybe just certain, in certain capacities, maybe just kind of catching up from, maybe being behind and being out of work during the pandemic. And now having this high, things are obviously, the cost of things are higher. So people may be lending, going to their credit cards as an extension of income. It's just the cost of that it's gonna borrowing that is just gonna be, it's just higher. And I think being in this high inflationary period just shows that, you know, you don't want to be holding on to cash just to be holding on to cash.
Right, right. So Renee, so let's say that you have a new client. Maybe walk us through an example here. Your approach with them. I think you have like a 4-step process or something that you spoke about before. What is your approach? So do you look at how they can grow their wealth, how they can provide for their family in case something happens to them? Do you look at debt consolidation programs? What is it, a holistic approach that you look at, and maybe talk about from the consumer experience perspective?
Yeah.
What is involved in your approach with getting them set for the future?
Yeah, no, great question. Because I think sometimes that is, a lot of people don't know what it entails in working with
Right.
a planner, or do they qualify to have,
Hmm.
a planner or a financial advisor. And so for me in my process, I think being a financial planner, which is different than a financial advisor, and I'll share what the difference is in a second, is
Mhm.
yes, I take a holistic approach, a comprehensive approach. And what that means is everything that touches your financial life, cash
Mhm.
flow, right? How are you budgeting? And I hate the word budget, but for simplicity, I'll use the word budgeting. What's coming in the door? What's going out the door? Are we optimizing your cash flow?
Mhm.
Debt reduction, right? Or debt management, right? Sometimes, again, we may be levered depending on someone's situation, leveraging debt as a tool, but understanding where they are today and where do they want to be. There's a whole numbers side to every single one of our financial lives, but what's really most important is really attaching that to someone's why, someone's vision, and how they view money in their own life, and really then leveraging these tools that can help them get where they want to be and grow wealth in the way that's meaningful for them, right? Not just saying,
Mhm.
hey, you have to build a $10 million retirement fund and put it into these vehicles, and there's no emotional attachment or why behind that. And but yes, it's looking at someone's cash flow, their debt management. So we're digging in, and I'm digging in with them. It's just understanding who they are and where they are today, and what their vision is. And that can change. I mean, life, like we
Mhm.
said at the beginning, life changes, life evolves, and where you are today and what you thought you wanted today may not be where you are in 3 years or 5 years, and giving yourself grace around that. And then understanding, that's what I always say is like really just the foundational part of your financial home is like really building that right foundation, making sure that you have the right pieces in your home, your financial home, that are going to protect you, right? Like you're not going to build a home on, wood slots. You're going to make sure it's on a solid foundation. In your financial life, you have to play defense. You have to make sure the things that you're building, as you're building that multi-story house, that it's on a good foundation. So that is protecting your wealth. And then
Right.
growing, right? Going up to each of those multi-level, those different layers in your house or levels in your house, is growing your dollars. We could be really strategic and get really fun and be tax efficient when you are, really thinking about the bigger picture and not just thinking it from a silo. Let me just try to focus on, again, I always use the analogy of a house. If I'm just focusing on just one room of the house, then you're neglecting everything else. What's the point of having a beautiful kitchen and then everything else in the house is either not built or completely neglected?
Right. Exactly. Do you find that when you first sit down with people that they pretty much have their retirement plans in order,
Yeah.
or they haven't thought about it, or they've talked about it, or they're not worried about it, or they're worried about it? Tell us a little bit about just the initial. I'm sure when you finish with them, they're in a much better space, but at the very beginning, what's your general sense on how prepared for retirement they are?
I think it also depends on what age someone is. Someone
Sure.
who are, working with, because I work with people probably in their like 30s or their mid 30s and above. But
Mhm.
it depends. I mean, someone who's in their 30s and they're even in their 40s, even into their early 50s, they're probably not prepared for retirement. Again, that could be also where they're choosing to live, right? Living here in Los Angeles is going to be very different than living, in other places of, maybe other parts of the country, maybe where,
Mhm.
whether maybe that is Nebraska, right? Or maybe that's in certain parts of
Mhm.
wherever that may be, if there's no state taxes. All of that said is younger generations, right? It's very hard, and I think we all probably felt this when we were younger. It's just like, oh, that feels really far off. So that's a lot of the answer that I get from younger people. But I think in the back of their mind, they're still thinking about it. They still want to prioritize it. So when people are a little bit older, I think the thing is more about, am I prepared? I think I have,
Mm.
either I'm completely off track, or I have no idea. Like I've just been shooting darts and I have no idea if I'm even close to the bullseye. And, or people are like, I think I'm on track, but then, we kind of uncover that they're not. Um, but I like to really prioritize, depending again where someone is in their financial journey, their life journey, and all of that, is really into 4 categories, and thinking about money in short term is like, what do we need for the next year or two? Your emergency fund, And if we're saving or we need money for that, again, a short period of time, then cash vehicles, cash equivalent vehicles, checking savings, high yield savings account is really the only place to put money. Then we're thinking about money in the midterm, that 3 to 5 year time frame. And then the third bucket is long term, your 10 plus year self. And then the fourth bucket is retirement. So again, depending on what someone's age and where they're at, it depends. Those buckets may change, because if I'm talking to someone in their 50s or their 60s, obviously the time frame may be a little bit different. But still, your retirement journey, and a lot of people don't realize this, retirement's not just getting you to a certain place. Let's say like yourself, if you retired at 65, God willing, you live another 30 years, right?
Right.
Like there's a whole side to the mountain that you have to be prepared for. You can't just climb up the mountain and say, I've made it. You have to get back down. You don't want to cause yourself accidents. So the only way to really prepare your, going down the mountain is by bringing the right tools with you, climbing up the mountain. You don't get to the peak of the mountain and say, oh shit, I forgot all of my equipment down at base camp.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, precisely. Yeah. And what role do you think that, again, I keep bringing up inflation because it is dramatically higher, and it's significant enough for beyond gasoline prices, right? The price of the price of food, the price of everything,
ridiculous, right? Yeah.
Has for the clients that you deal with, in this is just a general question, has this impacted their retirement plans or not yet?
I think people that are close or in retirement, yes, because we're thinking about yes, you're thinking one, and on top of that, obviously the market has not been, it's been down, right? We've had some blips of it being up this year, but it's, the S&P 500, and I'm not a proponent of putting all of your money in the S&P 500. I really believe in diversification. Yes, because of inflation, because of the markets, right? Like again, this is where, as you're climbing up the mountain, you want to be building the right tools with you, because we can't control taxes. We can't control inflation, right? We can't control what the market's going to do. So, my dad retired during the financial crisis in 2009. And he was kind of forced to, because the company that he worked for went under during the recession, right? At the age that he was at the time, he's not going to go out in the middle of a recession and find a job. So it's just that the circumstances were, he was born at a time where his close to retirement age, right, was just we kind of hit a financial crisis. So for me, it's like, whether it's inflation, right now, we may have, if we're in retirement or close to retirement, if I've been working with someone, if they've done the right planning and they come to me having done at least some of the right pieces, then we may be in a good position. If someone coming to me today and is looking to do planning and they're close to retirement or in retirement, yeah, we're having to look at like, what are the available opportunities? And some things we're like, hey, this is the trade-off. We have to deal with, dealing with this high inflationary period. And we're going to have to somehow figure out down the road, how to recover from these high prices, because they're not going to last forever. Obviously, like, we're not going to be in an 8.5% inflation for, the next 15, 20, 30 years.
Right. And that's why I bring it up, because I do think that people need to engage with professionals now to understand for their situation, do they need to make some adjustments? Because obviously the cash flow is impacted many, many people now. And so they need to figure out, and time is on your side with money, right? So the earlier you do it and get the advice, the less of a maybe pain that you're going to be going through will be the case as well. So, Renee, I've got a question here from the audience, but before that, I've got a question that I have actually. Sorelli did a report, and in 2021, they found that millennials have an average net worth in the United States of $278,000, and that and this has been growing at a rate since 2016 of 23% per year. So it's phenomenal. And that 6 out of 10 of these millennials are advice seekers. They don't want
Yep.
anything to do with self-directed.
Yep.
They don't invest for themselves. Does this match what you find in your portfolio, or is it different? And could you comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, well, millennials, they obviously came and, into the internet and working in the internet, age. And I think that is a big difference.
Yeah.
And you think about just like financial guidance, right? It's when you're getting, it's a generational thing. Like what our, if you're a millennial and you're taking advice from your grandparents or your parents, like it's outdated, some of these things. So just like anything else, there's technology, there's advice, like you got to usher, into the new times and really be getting, advice that's for current times. So you can kind of, again, forecast and have the foresight for your next like 40, 50, 60 years. And I do see that millennials and younger people are advice seekers, right? Because I think, again, what we were talking about earlier is that the internet is a great resource in a lot of ways, but there's so many opinions, and there's like, it's sometimes so hard to cut through the noise. I mean, even in this space, right, I could go on the internet and just like, really? Like if I
Right.
didn't have my solid ground and my conviction and my beliefs, because I know what I know and I'm educated and have these licenses, right? I would be like, I don't know which way I'm going. I feel that way about my health, right? Like as I'm kind of, as a woman in my 40s, right, dealing with, maybe some health issues or health things, right? I'm like, I don't know which way to turn. One person says this, the other person says that.
Right.
So yes, I see millennials as advice seekers, and they want to pay for the advice, right? And I think that is a very big difference in baby boomers, and the fact that it's very different. They want that partnership, and that's what I, really enjoy about that. And again, building wealth the new millennial way is very different than the older generations, because you can't just
Absolutely.
buy a home anymore, right, and let that be your wealth. Like most people are not in homes for 30, 40 years like my parents were.
Right. And just like leading millennials is it requires that leaders understand how millennials were brought up and their environment, right? And so for example, to tell a millennial you can't turn on your mobile phone at work, it's not going to work. That phone's going to stay with them. So why not find a way to convert that phone as a tool into an asset that can actually improve their contribution? But that is not a well understood concept. And, this kind of gets at the root of something called the Great Resignation that's been happening in the United States. So not to get too much off topic, but I think the message that I wanted to get out to millennials is that you've got an elite performer right here, Renee Cohen, that you can reach out to for financial advice. She's qualified, she's certified, and 6 out of 10 people nationwide are doing this. And it's a 23% growth rate on the number of millennials that have over $250,000. There's a lot of people there. So if you're not one of those 6 out of 10, jump on the bandwagon because there's a great opportunity there as well. We're getting a little low on time, and Jo Beth Collier has a great question leading into the final topic I want to talk about. And Jo Beth has been, who I think is from Dallas, and she's her career for the past 3 decades has been in the human services field. And the human services field is predominantly women, and the field is dramatically underfunded, especially the pay. But as she's commenting here, as you go higher up, then there's more men as well as higher pay. So the question is, do you think that there's a correlation between the low funding that results in low pay due to the fact of it being a female dominated field? Any views on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that women coming into the workforce, right, or working, is we tend to think about, working and the jobs like we're providing value, they'll see
Mhm.
the hard work we're doing, and therefore it will be rewarded. We're also not, obviously this is all very generally speaking. We don't we get in the jobs and then we try to create the value versus coming into the job, knowing our worth and kind of fighting for that worth on the front end.
Right.
And then,
Mhm.
when we're in the jobs, it's about, okay, I'm still not qualified for that promotion or for ask for that because of X, Y, and Z. So companies, and I think it's even more transparent, today than it was, maybe when she started her career, certainly when I started my career 20 years ago, is that, pay scales, right, there's zero transparency. And I know there's still a lot of, there's not a lot of transparency, but then also transparency in the review process and in the promotion process. And I think you're always waiting around not knowing, like, hey, like, am I supposed to, I'm creating this value, but I don't know how to communicate that. So that's
Mm.
where I think it's very easy for companies to say, well, if Renee's doing all of this work and she's not kind of raising her hand to try to get more money, why are they going to come to me and try to give me more money? They're going to
Right.
continue to, keep me at a level that I'm at because I'm not raising my hand. So that's where I think that, and as women, we have to be financially empowered, educated, and empowered, so we can have these kind of conversations, and making sure that, yes, at the top, that we can kind of rise to the top and have the value from bottom to top.
Right. Exactly. Any final words on the equal pay, what needs to be done to, I know it's a bit about boiling the ocean type of question, but how to make further progress? I mean, are you happy with the progress that's being made, or unhappy, or what do you think needs to be done to just push it further towards utopia?
Yeah, and I think that creates. I think we've come a far way, but I also think we have a long way to go. And I look at it as like it's not going to be something that we're going to see exponential change from like a Friday to a Monday, right? Like these are
Hmm.
things
Right.
that, as all of us, it takes every single one of us to have these type of conversations, and takes women to be educated, empowered, not to be running from, their own financial, kind of using the language of like, oh, I'll just deal with this another time. I'm too busy. I'm running too many things. I'm wearing too many
Mm.
hats in my household. My husband will just take care of it. All of those things are things that, as women, we need to really throw out. I don't care what kind of position you're in. And then
Right.
two is that collectively, if we can just kind of move the masses like incrementally, then yes, we can really make significant changes. We may not benefit from all of those changes. It's really, I always look at it as like, how can we move things forward so we can continue to pass the baton behind us to the next generation. So
Right.
their starting point is a lot further than where we were.
Right. And I think that just a closing remark that I'll make on that is that I think it's important for men to
Mhm.
step up and talk about this as well, and to do what they can. If you're, I can tell you some things that I've done is that we would always so we determine the compensation
Mhm.
and based on performance, and
Yep.
then we would put a gender lens on it just to make sure that there's no unconscious bias in
Mm.
those decisions, because a lot of performance is measured qualitatively, so it may not
Totally.
be necessarily
Mhm.
black and white with numbers, right? so
Yep.
so putting that gender lens on your final recommendations before they become final
Mhm.
will certainly surface some required maybe adjustments that need to be made at the last minute before you finalize the pay decisions. That's just one example. There's a
Yeah.
thousand others. And again, it's a boiling the ocean type of thing, but that's
Mhm.
an example that men and women in authoritative positions can actually start to do immediately
Yep.
to move this forward. And you might find that you don't need to make an adjustment. Your organization may be fine, but if you put that gender lens on it, you'll be surprised at what you see. So I hope that the HR people out there, if you're not doing this idea, embrace it, try it, and I'll bet you find that you'll make some changes to your compensation. Renee, we're a little bit over time. I thank you for coming on the program on this Friday and adding enormous value. What is the best way for people to contact you?
Well, I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can always send me a DM on LinkedIn and just look up my Renee Cohen, and I'm a CFP. So that either on LinkedIn or through my email, Renee, my first name, Renee, my last name, which is COHEN at nm.com. So there's a dot. There's a dot actually in between my first name. It's Renee.Cohen at N as in Nancy, M as in Mary.com. So shoot me an email or find me on LinkedIn, and I'm always happy to have a conversation. And my last words would be whether, you always start somewhere, right? And I think a lot of times, a lot of people feel like they'll wait until they get something, or they do this and I'll wait until I have this, until I could do financial planning or whatever that may be. And the sooner you start, you don't have to wait for that magic time.
Right. It's kind of like working out or anything to do with health. Just get out there and do something.
Yes.
If you can't walk your 12,000 steps today, go do 3. Go do 3. Don't do 1,000.
Exactly. 1,000 is better than 0, right? And
exactly.
Then you work your way up to the 12,000. And thank you, Brett, for this awesome conversation, and for everything you do for bringing, really, the equality, the conversation, and being that ally for women.
Great. Well, it's my pleasure. And it's always my pleasure to have the top decile of people in the market for what they do to deliver advice here. And I really appreciate that as well. So there you have it, folks. Thank you very much. Enjoy the replay. If those of you have seen this on the replay, or you want to watch it again, and feel free to reach out to either Renee or myself if there's anything further. I'll be back again next week with an announcement on the next guest, which will be in the UK. So we'll talk further about that. We're going to talk a little bit of agriculture in the UK at that point in time. So that should be interesting and quite different, and a great learning experience here in the LinkedIn library for everybody. So